الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله تعالى من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله. أما بعد، قال الله عز وجل في القرآن العظيم بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم: وقال ربكم ادعوني أستجب لكم إن الذين يستكبرون عن عبادتي سيدخلون جهنم داخرين. وقال تعالى: فسقى لهما ثم تولى إلى الظل فقال رب إني لما أنزلت إلي من خير فقير. وقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم: إذا سألت فاسأل الله وإذا استعنت فاستعن بالله. صدق الله العلي العظيم وصدق رسوله النبي الكريم ونحن على ذلك من الشاهدين والشاكرين والحمد لله رب العالمين. ثم أما بعد. We begin by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one, the Almighty, the everlasting, the ever-living. He is Al-Mujib, the one who responds, and As-Sami', the one who hears all. And we send salutations of peace and blessings upon His noble and chosen messenger, Muhammad al-Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. To proceed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Ghafir, chapter number 60, verse 40, He says, وَقَالَ رَبُّكُمُ ادْعُونِي أَسْتَجِبَ لَكُمْ. Say, call upon me. Allah is saying to humanity, call upon me, أَسْتَجِبَ لَكُمْ. I will respond to you. Call upon me and I will respond to you. Allah's response is guaranteed, but it's contingent upon us calling upon Him. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَسْتَكْبِرُونَ عَنْ عِبَادَتِي. Verily, those who are too arrogant or too proud to worship me. So here he implies that dua is a form of ibadah. As the Prophet says, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, ad-du'a huwa al-ibadah. Dua is ibadah. So dua is linked to worship. Verily, those who are too proud, too arrogant to call upon me, Allah is saying, implying. Those who dismiss dua as ineffective, as inefficient. Those who look at dua as more of like a supplement, kind of like a second afterthought. Not giving it any type of value, not giving it any type of priority. Allah is calling out to them and informing them. Verily, those who are too proud to call upon me, what is their end result? سَيَدْخُلُونَ جَهَنَّمَ دَاخِرِينَ. They will be entered into the hellfire fully humbled. They will be entered into the hellfire fully humbled. So a very clear and a very stark warning to us to never dismiss dua as the go-to thing for us. Many a times, whether it's our personal issues or whether it's global issues that the Muslims are confronted with, if someone is emphasizing dua, we're very quick to dismiss it. We're very quick to say, no, make dua all you want, but you have to do all these other things. And then if you were to challenge them on this, they would say that, no, we're not downplaying the importance of dua, it's just that we need to focus on other things as well. And us as Muslims, we need to realize and recognize that we should not fall into extremes. We should not fall into the extreme of dismissing dua as a viable mode of action, and nor should we go to the other extreme of not taking the means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has provided and just living in a fantasy that, I'm just going to raise my hands and that's it. I don't have to do anything else. Things will come to me as a result of me making dua, but no, I expect things. If I'm looking for a job, I want the job to fall into my lap. I shouldn't do anything. If I'm looking for marriage, I need that person to fall into my lap. I don't need to do anything. So we need to be, in this regard, we need to be balanced. We need to be moderate. We need to take a bit from both. We need to make the dua, but we also need to utilize the means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will provide for us, inshallah, through our supplicating to Allah. Now, dua is that really amazing thing that you can ask it for yourself and it will cause changes in your own life. And you can ask it for events that are happening around the world and it is able to change, it is able to cause change globally. And this is best demonstrated through the du'as of the prophets that are mentioned in the Quran. Now, there are many du'as and there are many prophets that are mentioned. A very quick example, Nuh alayhi salam, after he's given da'wah for 900 plus years, he calls out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Rabbi la tadhar ala al-ardi min al-kafirina dayyara. That, oh Allah, do not let any disbeliever remain on earth. And thereupon, once he made this dua, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala caused the flood to occur and all the disbelievers were taken care of. And then we have the dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And there are many du'as that he made. And his du'as they were not only answered in his time, but they were answered thousands and thousands of years later. One dua in particular is when he called out to Allah and he said that, oh Allah, send from amongst the people someone who would recite your book, who would teach them the wisdom and the book, and he will purify them. Then Allah responds to this in subsequent verses, and he says that we did send a messenger from amongst the people who would recite to them the book, who purified them, who would teach them the book, and who would teach them the wisdom. And the implication of this is that the answer to the dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam was the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And of course, with the coming of the Prophet was a complete change in the history of the world and the makeup of the world as well, through the expansion of Islam. Now, what I want to focus on today, in particular, is a dua of Musa alayhi salam. And I say a dua because there are, once again, many du'as that Musa alayhi salam made. And they're all very incredible. But there is one in particular that its significance is very profound because of what it eventually led to. And if we understand the context and the circumstances surrounding the making of this dua, then inshallah this is something that gives us hope and makes us want to make this dua for ourselves for whatever difficulties and hardships that we are going through. So, some very quick context. The events that occurred before leading up to this dua. Musa alayhi salam is born, his life was under threat, so his mother puts him in a basket into a river. He ends up in the palace of Pharaoh. He grows up there, he grows up essentially as the Prince of Egypt. And he is living in luxury. He's living in complete luxury because he's living with the Pharaoh, with Fir'aun. Eventually there comes a time where there is a dispute that is happening between his fellow Bani Israeli and a local Egyptian native. This dispute happens. Musa alayhi salam, who was not a prophet at this time, he ends up killing the local Egyptian person. As a result of this, when Fir'aun finds out, he sends his army, he sends his soldiers after him, and he is told to leave the land by one of his close friends. So Musa alayhi salam, he leaves the land and he literally leaves with just the clothes on his back. Nothing else. All the luxury that he lived with, he had to forfeit all that. He leaves with just the clothes on his back. Some of the commentators say he wasn't even wearing shoes. And he leaves and he just goes. He just walks. He doesn't know where he's going. And he makes dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Asa Rabbi an yahdiyani sawa as-sabil. Perhaps my Lord will guide me to the right way. As he's en route, as he's already left, he makes dua that perhaps my Lord will guide me to the right way. He doesn't know where he's going. And eventually, he ends up in a place called Madian. And Madian, if you've heard of this place, this is the place where Shu'aib alayhi salam was sent to. So he ends up at Madian. And when he ends up at Madian, he sees that there's a well. And around this well is a group of shepherds, made up of primarily men, that are trying to dig water out from this well. Now, as he's seeing what's going on, he sees to the side, just outside of this commotion, there are two girls that are there with their herd of animals that are waiting. Now, Musa alayhi salam, one thing to note and to keep in mind is that he ran. Why? Because he killed this man. Now, once he does this, he recognizes the error that he did this, and he did not intend to kill this person. So he immediately makes dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah forgives him almost immediately as well. But he still feels like he needs to atone. He still feels like he needs to do something to put distance between him and the sin, although Allah has already forgiven him. So he's trying to look for any opportunity of good that he can do. And so when he sees these girls, he immediately recognizes that these girls, they don't want to go in amongst these men. They look like honorable, respectable ladies. They don't want to go in with these men. So what he does is that he goes up to them, straight to the point, and he says, "What is the matter? What is the matter? What is the problem? That you're just standing out here?" And they say, very simply, that we need water for our animals. However, we need water for our animals, and we are waiting for all these men to be done, and we're doing this because our father is an old man. So our father can't come, so that's why we're here on his behalf to take care of these animals. And we're waiting until everybody leaves. And Musa a.s., in his very depraved state. Now, some of the commentators, Ibn Abbas, he mentions that Musa a.s., he travels from Egypt to Madian, which is in the Arabian Peninsula. So he said all he had was the clothes on his back. He didn't have shoes. All he ate in this journey was just leaves and grass that he found. And he was so malnourished to the point that his stomach was meeting his back. That's the description of Musa a.s. So he's extremely malnourished. He doesn't have anything with him. And on top of that, he's a fugitive. He's running from the law, so to speak. And the soldiers were given the command that if you were to see Musa a.s., you were to kill him. So he's got all these things that are going on for him. But nonetheless, he's very malnourished. And there's a stone on top of this well. So the Quran describes that Musa a.s. removes the stone. And then the commentators, they say that this stone was so heavy that it would take 10 men to remove it. Musa a.s., he's the one, he removes it himself in his malnourished state. Nonetheless, he gets the water. He then goes and he feeds the animals of these ladies without them asking or requesting it from him. And then he does what he does, doesn't say anything to them, turns away, and then walks towards a shade, which is where he then makes this dua. And the Quran describes, فَسَقَى لَهُمَا ثُمَّ تَوَلَّى. So he watered their herd for them, and then he turns, meaning he turned away from them. He turns and ثُمَّ تَوَلَّى إِلَى الظِّلَّةِ. So he goes then towards the shade of a tree, and he says, فَقَالَ رَبِّي إِنِّي لِمَا أَنزَلْتَ إِلَيَّ مِنْ خَيْرٍ فَقِيرٍ. رَبِّي إِنِّي لِمَا أَنزَلْتَ إِلَيَّ مِنْ خَيْرٍ فَقِيرٍ. My Lord, I am truly in need. My Lord, I am truly in need of whatever good that you may have in store for me. I'll repeat it one more time. My Lord, I am truly in need of whatever good that you have in store for me, or whatever good that you will reveal to me. So he does not specify what he needs. What he needs at that point, he needs food, he needs money, he needs things in his hand, because he needs a way to live. He doesn't have anything with him at this moment. Now, like I said, what makes this dua so profound? It's what happens after. As he's resting on the tree, one of the girls that he helped out, they eventually left to their father, and they told their father what happened. And the father was a bit surprised, because usually it would take them all day to come back from this well. But today they came home early. So the father's obviously a bit astonished, what happened? So they tell him what happened. And then he tells the girls to go to Musa a.s. and to bring him to the father. So then one of the girls comes, and she says that, my father would like to reward you for what you did. My father would like to reward you for what you did. Please come with me. So they go. And even in the manner that this occurred, I cannot go into the details, but it really shows the modesty and the humility of Musa alayhi. So he rocks up to the father's house. And the father says that, you've done this for me. Long story short, he offers one of his daughters in marriage. And he says that the condition of this is that you have to work for me for about 8 to 10 years. Either 8 years or for 10 years. And the commentators, some say that he worked for 8 years, others say he worked for the full 10 years. But once again, just circle back. He makes this dua, once again, he doesn't have any possessions of his own. All he has is the clothes on his back. He's a fugitive. He's wanted for murder. He doesn't have a job. He doesn't have any possession. He doesn't have any wealth. He makes this dua to Allah, recognizing his need. And he's not specifying that, oh, I want this and that. Remember, he comes from the life of living. He's coming from a palace. He's living in a palace. He was a prince. So he could have very easily been like, I only want this type of job, or I only want, this particular standard of clothes, or etc. No, he says, whatever good of Allah you have in need for me, I'm willing to accept it. So this is a very profound lesson for us, that when things are not going well for us, that we shouldn't be needy and picky. That we should recognize that whatever we ask for Allah, and He gives us things perhaps in a manner that we may not necessarily like, we must understand that these are opportunities Allah is sending our way to help us out of our situation. And that perhaps taking these lesser opportunities, we end up with better opportunities and in a better position. So Musa alayhi salam goes from having nothing to then he makes his dua, to then getting married, to having a job, and then shortly after that he ends up obtaining his prophecy. So this is what happened to a prophet of Allah. And Allah has recorded this in the Quran for us, not to just read over and gloss over, but for us to understand and to implement. So this is chapter 28, verse 24. And so I encourage everybody that when we go home, inshallah, and we're not aware of this dua, to memorize this dua, memorize its meaning, and to then implement it in our lives. And whatever good Allah sends our way, we must avail the opportunity and be grateful for His blessings. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us good and make us grateful for what He grants us. Wa akhira da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.